So now that we have the basic layout of our page done and some basic background colors, I'm going to go through and make another pass starting at the top bar and working my way down through the page, continuing with the layout. So if you look in the top bar here, you'll see that they have the phone number here on the left and the address here on the right. And ours is just aligned where they're squished up next to each other. So that's where I'll begin. And to understand that, you really have to understand how elements and the box model works in CSS. So make sure to go study the W3 Schools tutorial on CSS about the box model. For now, I'll explain some basic things about it. So I have my top bar in the code, and then I have this anchor tag that has my phone number in it. I'm going to come into CSS. I'm going to first select the top bar div, and then I'm going to go down to that anchor tag. Now, the anchor tag by default is an inline element. So when I highlight it, the element is only as wide as the content that it displays. So if I change the display on this to a block level element and I refresh, you'll see that that moves the next thing to the, or moves the address to the next line. And that's because it converted that from an inline element to a block level element. And you can see by highlighting it in the developer tools that it's now taking up the full entire row. And because we selected all the A tags under top bar, it's doing the same thing with the A tag we have for the address. So that's not exactly what we want, but there's a variation of block which is called an inline block, which will make it a block element, and so you can specify the width, but it will do it in line so they can bump up against each other. Now if I save that and refresh it, you see that it moves up the address next to the phone number, and the size here is now dictated by the size of the A tag. So to fix this, I just want to specify that the width is 50% of the total space I have inside the box. So if I save that and hit refresh, you see I have this, it drops it down again. And if I inspect the element, this is a little bit odd because my box, you can see in the blue, is 50%, and that one's 50%, so why does it not align them in line? Well, that's with this little bug, and it's not really a bug, it's just how the browser works, but it kind of bugs me. So in our code here, there's actually a space between this A tag and this A tag, and the browser is rendering some space in there, which is causing this not to line up. So some people would hack this and maybe put 49%. See, if I do that, this actually moves up, and so it doesn't overflow. But I don't like that. That's too much of a hack. So after doing some research, I found out that if you do width 50%, you have to have this A tag lined up next to this A tag so there's no space in between. So if I save that and I refresh it, now I get the layout that I want. So that this is on the left, this is on the right. That's on the left, this is on the right. So going on to the rest of the page, you see that there's a similar concept here with Ernie Sports Deli logo, and there's this Home of the Champ text here. So if we come back down to our code here, we see we have this image here, and then we have this Home of the Champ. So to build this out, I'm actually going to change things around, and this section tag, I'm going to change this to a div tag, and I'm going to give it a class called logo. And I'll put the logo image inside of there. And then I'm going to make another div tag with a class called slogan. And I'll put this h1 tag in here. And the reason I'm doing this partially is to show you a different way of separating the boxes out. But also, I can't make this h1 tag an inline block element because I need to convert this into two separate sections. So I'm going to have one section which is home of the, and then I need champ to be in a different size, and I can't do that inside of an H1 tag like that, so I'm going to change this right now. So home of the is going to be a span, and then champ will be a different style of text, and that will come into play later. But this gives me this new setup where I have one box for the logo, and then I have another box for the slogan. So if I save that and refresh here, you see nothing really changes because I haven't done any CSS changes. So jumping into the CSS, I'll come down to the bottom, and for my class logo and my class slogan, I'll follow the same pattern and say display inline block, and then the width will be 50%. Now if I refresh that, let's check out why that didn't work. So if I inspect the element, I see my class logo here, and that looks like it is taking up 50% of the screen. I take slogan, and that's taking up 50% of the screen. So I'm running into that same issue that I just mentioned before, where there is this space that's between these two, between this div tag and this div tag, so I need to move that up onto the same line, refresh that, and now I have my box here, which is for the logo, my box here, which is home of the champ. And so later I can work on centering that, changing the text. But that's, again, we're taking a great big pass through this to make sure that all of the pieces are in the right components, are in the right boxes. And one last final change I forgot is I need to delete this remaining section tag. Moving on, we have our navigation menu, and you can see the way that we did our UL element with all of these LI elements. It's put it in a list that goes vertically, and we need it to go horizontally. And so highlighting these, you can see that these are block elements that are taking up the entire width of the container that they're in. And so we don't want that. We want to change those to inline elements. So coming into our CSS, we're going to go under our nav element, we're going to select all the LI elements, and we'll change the display to inline. Save that, and then refresh here, and you can see that makes those inline elements, and their space that they take up is the width that is required by the text, and so we have these inline, just like that. The next section of this page is the main page, where we have the image of the food here, we have our home H1 tag here, we also have our image, and if we look at the original site, they're following the same pattern where the home is on the left, which is split equally with this image right here, and then we have the content in the middle. So coming to the HTML, there's one change that I'd like to make, and I'm going to say that our main content has a header, which is a lot of the times a main content like a blog post or something will have a header with an image of it. So this isn't referring to the header of the whole page, but it's the header of the main content box. So I'll create a new header tag, and I want the image that we're using to be in that header. And now we have our H2 tag, which because I realized that this isn't really the first heading, this is more of a slogan, and I changed that around in the HTML up here. This has now become our H1 tag, which is the main header for the page. So I'll switch that to H1. Again, not that that makes any difference in the code, it just is more understandable to the browser and to another coder that's coming to look at it. So you can see here that we have H1 and we have the image that we have for Facebook. So the first thing I'm going to work on is this H1 tag. So coming down into our CSS, under the main section, I'm going to say that our main H1 needs to be display inline block with a width of 50%. If I save that, refresh that, I can inspect the element, make sure that I did it right. So you can see the blue was taking 50% of the page. Now I need to do the same thing for this A tag that has this image in it. So for simplicity, I'm going to say the main A, refresh, and that didn't move it over like I thought. So let's right click and inspect the element, see what's going on. And you can see the H1 there, that's 470, which is 50%. This A tag is 470, which is 50%, but the image is actually going outside of the A tag, and that's because the image is 564, and so that's looks like that's the problem. So I'll come back into CSS and I'm going to say this main A image is the width needs to be, and let's go over to this page and see how big that width is. So I'll just click inspect, and that's looks like it's 240 pixels wide there that they've set it to. So I'll set ours at 240 pixels. And that shrinks it down. Okay, now it's not, we're having that same problem. So let's go back and look at the code here, and we probably have the same thing that we had before where there is this invisible space. So if I move that back up, so there's no space between this element and that element, and hit save, refresh, there we go. Now, some people may be looking at this and saying, okay, main H1, main A, is that discoverable? Is it not discoverable? Main A image, what's that referring to? To some people that will make sense, right? We come to our main tag, and then we go to the H1, we do something, and we go to the A tag, and we do something else with the styles. So the problem is, if we ever add another anchor tag to the main element, this is going to be applied to that, and we may not want it to be. So one way of fixing that or preventing that is if we come into our A tag and we add a class called Facebook link, we could save that. And now we can say, instead of main, we could say .facebook link, and we're selecting that directly. And it applies the same style. So a lot of that's just going to be on preference and the people you're working with and the style guide that they have, and then your own personal preference. That may be a premature optimization here. So I can just say main A and take this back out. But later that might come back to bite me, and that's why we have a code editor. We can modify it and fix it. So we'll save, hit refresh, and there we go. The last section on our page is the footer, which if we go to the original page, we'll see that they have 3 containers here. So one container is for this contact information. The next container in the middle is for this menu, and the third container is the address. And then we have this last container, which is along the bottom, which is just the paragraph tag we have for the copyright. So I want to imitate that by coming into the code, adding a new container around this first section, which is the contact information. So you'll need to type in div class equals, and we'll call that contact info. Open, and then we'll close this tag. The UL is an element by itself, so we'll keep that there. And then the last is our A tag, which because we only have one, we'll probably just use this, and I'll say this is class equals address info, and we'll save that. So we had to do this div around the 2 A tags because they're stacked on top of each other. Where with this other A tag, we can just set the style there and make it a block level element. So save that, refresh, nothing changes much here until we go into our CSS. And I will come right below the footer. And the first thing I'll say is our contact info needs to be display inline block. The width, instead of being 50%, we'll say is 33%. And then we'll save that. And we will refresh, and you'll see that by inspecting the element, we get our contact info box that's 33 pixels wide, or sorry, 33% wide, but then the rest are 100%, so we need to go in and fix that. So we'll say our footer UL, we can actually put that here. The footer UL will be a display inline block. And you see it moves that over. And the last one that we needed to add was our address info. And refresh that. So now we have the 3 boxes here. 1 box for the contact info, 1 box for our nav link, and then 1 box for this A class here. So the layout is basically done. In summary, we've gone through and tried to imitate the location or the basic layout positioning of our main boxes, which the box on the left and the box on the right in the header, the box on the left and the box on the right with this in this logo menu here. In our navigation menu, we made this more imitate what's here. We've laid out our main image with our H1 tag and then this link, and then our footer is coming together. So another pass that took a little bit of time, but we're getting closer to the final product.